Welcome to season 3 of the Gastric Mindset podcast, everybody, where we should continue to have the same wonderful, inspirational conversations with those who have first-hand experience of going through this journey and those who are professionals within the field. I would love if you could help me grow this tiny podcast. Share it with people who need some mindset support, who are going through bariatric surgery. We know it could be a really lonely journey. So pass it along. Give me a review wherever you listen to your podcast. Send me a DM on Instagram if there's a conversation that you would love to have. I hope you get so much value out of the conversations. And thank you for listening and hanging on with me. I love the podcast, and I hope to bring a lot more value in season 3. Hello everybody. In today's episode, I'm speaking to Sabrina all the way from Canada. Actually, she may be my first Canadian guest, so welcome. Tell us a bit about you, Sabrina.
Thank you so much for having me. Yes, I'm Sabrina Magnan. I'm located in Montreal, Canada. And I'm an intuitive eating and food freedom coach, and I help women who have been stuck in the diet cycle for the majority of their adult life. I help them put a stop to yo-yo dieting, heal their relationship with food so that they can eat without guilt, constant obsession, or fear of losing control, and so that they can feel, quote unquote, normal around food and be intuitive eaters.
That's really exciting. And I haven't actually spoken to anybody about intuitive eating because I know it can be a bit controversial at times. So I'm really excited to have this conversation. So Sabrina, did your journey start from a place of being going to school and learning, or was it your own journey?
Yes, as most people who do this work, it was my own personal struggle and experience that has led me into wanting to help other people. My story, if I were to try to make a long story short, started around the time I was 16 years old. So I grew up as a synchronized swimmer. I don't know if you're familiar with the sport, but it's very similar to ballet or gymnastics, a very big focus on your body, the way that you look. And so I didn't realize it at the time, but I developed this really skewed relationship with my body and this idea of what the quote unquote right body was. And so you're surrounded by girls who are tall and thin and have these really thin legs. And I had this obsession with having a thigh gap, even though my body is not meant to have a thigh gap. And when I retired from the sport at 16, I started noticing my body was changing, and my hips started getting wider and my thighs started getting bigger. And there was nothing wrong with that. When I look back on it at the time, I was just growing into my healthy adult body because I was no longer training like an elite athlete. I was just a normal girl. But at the time, with the influence of my upbringing and of diet culture, we are just conditioned to hate our bodies and to believe there's something wrong with it. So I look back on it and I have so much compassion for that little 16-year-old girl because there was nothing wrong with my body. But I thought I needed to lose weight. So I did what anyone else would do. And I started going on the internet and looking at different ways to lose weight and to eat less and to change the way that I was eating. And so thus began years of binge eating, restricting, feeling out of control around food, being good all day and then losing control at night, or being good from Monday to Friday and then binging all weekend and fluctuating between weights. And it all kind of culminated. I thought I was doing this in the name of quote unquote health, because that's really like diet culture has gotten really savvy and it makes you believe that we are all doing this in the name of health and wellness. And I remember this was after years and years of feeling obsessed with food, always thinking about how what I'm eating is going to affect the number on the scale and over exercising and having this like really unhealthy relationship with myself as well, because it's really hard to have self-esteem and confidence when no matter what your body looks like, you think there's something wrong with it. And I remember it was my sister's baby shower. She was having her first ever kid. I was becoming an aunt for the first time. This day that should have been like so joyful, so happy. All I remember from that day is feeling like food had control over me. My mom had gotten this caterer, so we had this food table of all of the foods that at the time were my quote unquote forbidden foods. So it was like those little, those little tiny sandwiches and like pasta salad and sweets. And I wasn't able to fully have like good, deep conversations with people because my entire focus and attention was on that table. And even when I was full, it was like something had taken over me and I just kept going back for more, kept going back for more. I felt so sick, so uncomfortable. I remember my sister was opening her presents and I was on my phone on MyFitnessPal to try to estimate how many calories I had eaten and like try to like mitigate the damage. Okay, maybe it wasn't that bad. And that night I was sitting in my parents' like dark, cold basement. And I was also contemplating that summer going to Italy to just have a summer. I didn't have any responsibilities and I really wanted to travel. Like travel is one of those things that I'm really passionate about. And I had never gone on a solo trip. And I was there that night, kind of like hitting my rock bottom of being so angry at myself that I say that family is such a big value of mine. I say that travel is such a big value of mine, but I'm not living in accordance with those values. Because when I'm with my family, when I'm with my friends, when I'm with people I love, I'm there physically, but I'm not really there because I'm just in my head thinking about what I should be eating and the calories I had eaten. And I was holding myself back from going to Italy because I was so scared of gaining weight. And at that point, I was under my set point weight. I was not at the weight that is healthy and maintainable for me. And I think I knew that subconsciously because I knew if I go to Italy, I'm going to be around pasta and gelato and cheese and all of these foods that gave me a lot of anxiety at the time. And people knew that I had this like unhealthy obsession with food, but I don't think they knew the extent. And I don't think they knew that it was borderline an eating disorder. And now I look back on it and it was an eating disorder. And people would make comments of like, oh, if you go to Italy, you're going to have to eat pasta. And they would make jokes about it. And they didn't realize that like those small comments or like, oh my God, if you go to Italy, you're going to gain so much weight. These comments, when you're struggling with food and your body, like they cut deep. And so I looked at my life and I started thinking about my future. I stopped thinking about, okay, right now, what feels comfortable, what feels familiar, because what felt comfortable at the time was this over control of food and constantly like looking after my body. And I thought about my future and I thought about what I wanted from my life in the long term. And I looked at if I ever want kids and if I ever want to travel and I want to do these things that I say I want to do, how am I ever going to be able to do that if I keep living the way that I'm doing now? Because right now I can't even have maple syrup without having anxiety. So if I'm having kids and we're going to brunch, like that's not going to happen. And I thought about me as an 80-year-old. And if I were to look back on my life and see how much time, energy, and mental space was literally wasted obsessing over what my body looks like, what I'm eating, all of these things that in the grand scheme of things, they're so irrelevant. Because the things that actually matter are like my family, my friends, my career, my how much joy I experience in my life. It was really looking at my future and seeing if I don't do something about this now, nothing's ever going to change. You're going to have to do something that feels really uncomfortable. Like, I find it so silly when I tell this story of me going to Italy, like how scary and uncomfortable it felt. Not because I was going to a new country, but because that was like a decision I was making of, you're breaking this pattern because this is not healthy for you. This is not how you want to live. And going to Italy made me see something really important, which was a culture of joy and of peace around food. When I was in Italy, I couldn't track every single calorie I was eating. I was living in an Italian family's home. They were making food for me. I remember looking at my Italian mama who was making the food and like seeing how much olive oil she was putting. And I was like, oh my God, that is like 300 calories. Like, I was counting everything. And it was like this exposure to a quote unquote lack of control around what I was eating that forced me to focus on something else, which is, now that you're not weighing yourself every day and you're not counting everything and you literally can't, and you're exposed to foods that like you will look stupid if you say no to the pasta, it made me have to tune inwards and have to start listening to what my body was communicating with me. And what I noticed is that the more I ate, and the more I ate carbs and these foods that I never allowed myself to eat in the past, I thought about food less. I wasn't binging anymore. I didn't feel anxious all the time around food. I had more energy to actually want to work out, not because I was trying to burn calories, but because it felt good. And I'm not going to say that summer, quote unquote, fixed me. And I don't think that I needed to be fixed, but it planted the seed of something is here, because you were eating more. You were allowing yourself to eat foods that you love, and you felt the best you felt in years. And so I came back to Montreal and I decided I'm really going to make an effort to hold on to what I was doing in Italy, which is hard because in Italy, diet culture is not as persuasive as it is in North America or in the UK. And so I went through a couple of years of kind of ebbing and flowing. I developed orthorexia during that time. But then I learned about intuitive eating, and I looked back on it and I was like, that's what I did in Italy. I was an intuitive eater, and it all clicked for me. And as I started learning about intuitive eating, I was mind blown that A, I didn't know about it earlier, B, that most people still don't know about it. And when I started talking to women about my story and what I was doing, I realized that there's millions of women who are experiencing the same thing I was experiencing. No one talks about it though, because there's so much shame, there's so much guilt around it. And so I made it my mission, and I made it my career and my passion to be able to help other women in the way that I had to help myself, because there's not enough voices in the world in a world of diet culture who are doing this work. That was not short at all.
Amazing. No, it was brilliant. And I love listening to everybody's story because it differs so much, but then there's that common thread that runs through all our stories, especially. So that was amazing. And as somebody who has an Italian husband from Napoli, I know the amount of food and the fabulousness that, when you go to Italy, you don't, and the amount of courses that they have, we start and well, how come nobody, but it's because it's all really food made with love and amazingness. Yeah. And then we'll go for ice cream and coffee, and I was like, I'm constantly just eating, but amazing. And I love the fact that you went somewhere and it gave your brain that rest.
Yeah.
It reduced that noise, right? That's what
I think a lot of people will hear that story and say like, well, of course you felt that way. You were in Italy. The food is different and it's so much more fresh. And like, who isn't happy in Italy? And I will say, yes, absolutely. Italy is something of its own. It is amazing. But I experienced the same kind of freedom that I did then now in a culture filled with dieting and talks about weight loss. But because I've done this work and I've changed my entire beliefs around food and my body, it is 100% possible to experience that in whatever culture you're in. But it does require being intentional, because diet culture is the persuasive like norm. And so if you're just going along and sleepwalking through life and going on autopilot, it's kind of like a river. Like, you're going to go with the current unless you decide to swim against it.
Yeah, no, definitely. And I think what I would find, what I do find hard is that everywhere you turn, I've spent years I spent years and years ignoring my natural hunger cues. So I didn't know when I was actually hungry. I was just, I was I was restricting or I was binging.
Mm-hmm.
There was no middle, right? There was no, so actually really trusting your body, or letting your body trust you to tell you, to give you those signals again. And then you add the complexities of having weight loss surgery also on top of that. Intuitive eating is something I'm always desperate to really, and I know that's the final answer, right, long term, but I think with some of us, there's also a bridge that needs to be built a little, because we've come from a place where we've tried every fad diet going in the world. Our body doesn't trust us. And then we've had weight loss surgery, and all the hormones and everything's turned everything off for a nice period of time. And then they start to return. And then the mindset goes back to, oh, I must start keto again. And then, so it's that bit, it's being okay with those feelings, and being okay to know that I'm not hungry, but I want to really learn my body again. So speak to somebody like me who 100% doesn't still get those.
Yeah. That's such an important point to talk about. I have worked with many clients who had gone through weight loss surgery, and it's so tough, because most people who go through weight loss surgery have been given the promise, that like false promises, that you'll do that and then all of your food issues will go away. It will be perfect. Like, you'll feel confident. Like, it is like the ultimate magic pill.
Uh-huh.
And I don't blame anyone who would get that, especially in the kind of society that we live in. We want to go for the thing that we think is going to fix us. And what I'll often see from the members inside my program who had gone through weight loss surgery is they realize afterwards, it's like, oh, but all of the reasons why I needed weight loss surgery, all of the reasons why I was turning to food have not been addressed.
Yeah.
All of the psychological side of it, the emotional side of it, the way that I was using food for comfort or for loneliness or whatever was the reason, it's still there. It's come back, because it's like the roots are the same. And so the weeds are going to keep growing back. So when I talk about intuitive eating, when, if we're talking in the context of after having weight loss surgery, you said something really important, which is before and after, your body doesn't trust you. You don't trust your body. There's such a lack of trust. And so when you're going on an intuitive eating journey, the word journey, I honestly hate to say it. I hate the word journey. Every time I say it, I think of like Miley Cyrus, like it's a journey, like it's a climb, but it is a journey, and it is a process that is built off of trust. And it's really hard for someone who is used to controlling every outcome, controlling everything that you put into your body, to surrender and to trust the process. And even when I'm talking to my members, when we first start working together, to say trust the process, I even want to throw up just saying it out of my mouth, because it's so hard for someone to really just let go and surrender. But I want you to think of it this way. You and your body are born as allies, and your body is constantly working for your survival and for you to feel its best. So if you think about the way that it's communicated with you in every time that you need to go pee, you feel discomfort in your bladder. It's like, all right, this doesn't feel great. Let's do something about it. Message, action. Same thing for sleep. You start yawning, your eyes get heavy, they start getting dry, and it's like message leads to an action, and your action will be, I'm going to rest. Same for when you're thirsty. I need water, message action. But we are born with that same signal, that same functioning when it comes to food. And if you look at toddlers or babies don't know about calories. They don't know about body image. They don't have any of those issues. And so they will cry when they're hungry. And then once they're fed, they will stop. And if you don't interfere with a baby or a toddler's eating, they will eat a wide variety of food. And this has been shown in many studies. And I think I always bring it back to my nieces and nephews. They are all under 5 and they are all intuitive eaters. And I think of my niece particularly, she is 5, she's in kindergarten now, which is crazy. And if you ask her what she wants to eat as a snack, one day it will be blueberries. Another day it might be a cracker or a granola bar. Like, it will vary because she doesn't know what is quote unquote right or wrong. She just knows this is what I feel like having. And somewhere along the line, if you've had issues with food, issues with your body, you stop trusting that because you think there's something wrong with your body. I can't possibly listen to it because if I listen to it, I'm overweight. And anyone who has struggled with their bodies from an early age was probably told by their parents or by their doctors that there's something wrong with your body, your child's overweight. And no one ever looks at the actual habits, right? Maybe that person, maybe that young girl or young boy, they had really healthy habits. Maybe they were listening to their bodies and they were moving the right amount, but because their body was just naturally bigger, was just a naturally bigger frame, they started restricting their food. And that's when the trust and the allyship between you and your body gets broken, because your body has been communicating with you your entire life and you've been responding. And now it's still trying to communicate with you, but you're no longer responding in a way that it needs. And so maybe it's saying, I'm hungry, feed me, but you're saying you shouldn't be hungry. I'm going to have black coffee or diet soda or popcorn and rice cakes. I'm going to eat air food, or I'm just going to eat a shit ton of lettuce. I'm sorry, I don't know if I'm allowed to swear on your podcast, but you stop responding to it. And so a really good way to understand how this trust gets broken is, imagine you have a best friend. You've been best friends for years and you call each other whenever you call her. She answers whenever she calls you, you answer. And then one day you decide, I'm going to stop answering. So she calls, as always, expecting for you to answer, and you don't answer. And then she calls and she calls and she calls. And this goes on for a week. And then eventually she's like, okay, well, I don't know what happened here, but she's not answering me anymore. The trust is broken. A relationship is built on communal trust on both sides. And so if you stop answering the phone calls, she's going to stop calling. And so that's what you'll often see with someone who struggles with listening to their bodies. They're like, I literally don't know how to listen to my body. It feels confusing. I don't trust myself. And that's not because there's something wrong with you. That's not because there's something wrong with your body, that you can't be an intuitive eater. It's simply that your body, as a form of survival, a protection mechanism, every time that it spoke to you about hunger, you didn't respond in the way that it needed to. And so those hunger cues get wonky, they get faded. And so now, instead of feeling like all of the different variations of hunger, the extreme hunger, the mild hunger, the regular hunger, all of those different pieces, you're only feeling the hunger when it is so extreme, when it's like, you know what, like you need to get food in my body right now. And so that's what you'll often see with people who struggle with overeating or feeling chaotic around food, is that they wait until they're so hungry to eat, because that's the only time that they're used to eating, that at that point, your hunger is going to rebound to the other side. And so your body is going to need food, and they're going to need food quickly. So you're going to be looking for those foods that are going to provide quick fuel, sugar, carbs. That's the source of energy that your body is able to take in and digest properly and quickly. And so you'll often see overeating, and that's where you go from like, I'm so hungry, I'm binging. I'm so hungry, I'm binging. And so if we're going back to that analogy with your best friend, if you were to just call her up once, she would be like, you stopped answering me. You literally ghosted me. You disappeared. And so one phone call is not going to fix the trust in a relationship. And so if you want to rebuild trust with your body, you actually need to go first. You need to show your body that we're not doing this anymore. We're not going through periods of starvation. We're not going on keto anymore. Food is abundant. Food is consistent. Food is no longer scarce. Because if your body still feels like it's a survival mechanism, it's not going to communicate with you in the way that it would need to build that trust. Does that make sense?
No, perfect sense. That's great. And I love the analogy of the best friend. I think, so in regards to people that have had weight loss surgery and set point theory, I wonder, because I think, the body is always going to try to get back to its highest weight because it wants to keep us alive. So ultimately, at some point, we're all going to struggle and we're having to go against our bodies. What do you say to the set point theory? I heard you refer to it earlier as well.
Yeah. So set point weight theory, have you ever talked about it on the podcast before?
I've tried to explain it, but I haven't had anybody fully, explain it. So yeah, if you could do a summary of it, that'd be great.
Yeah, absolutely. So set point weight theory is not so much of a theory as it is a fact, and it's not so much of a weight as it is a range. And so all human beings have this set point range, and you can think about it as like your weight thermostat. It is the range at which your body feels its best. So that range could be 10 to 20 pounds. And so if you're someone who fluctuates like 10 pounds throughout a year, there's nothing wrong with that. It's actually normal. Like your body will fluctuate. That is just a human condition. Your weight and your range can kind of fluctuate throughout life. It might increase over time. And there's certain things that affect that weight. And so some of those things are lifestyle changes, hormonal changes. So you'll often see people who are going through PCOS or thyroid issues who notice like, no matter what I do, if I change my eating, if I change my exercise, like I'm gaining weight. And there's actually nothing wrong with that. Your body is going through something and your set point weight will increase. And a big factor that influences set point weight is dieting, because every time that you diet, your body sees that as a threat to your survival, because it doesn't know the difference between actual starvation and intentional restriction. It just feels food is inconsistent. And so when I do get access to food, I'm going to hold on to those calories. I'm going to create a fat storage because I don't know when's the next time that this girl is going to feed me. She skips meals. Sometimes she won't feed me. Sometimes she overexercises. So I'm just going to, as a protection, I'm going to hold on to that. And so that set point range, a good way to see it is like if you go to a dog park, you're going to see Chihuahuas, you're going to see Golden Retrievers, you're going to see a Great Dane, you're going to see the exact same animal, but with a bunch of different body types. And we don't see one as better than the other. We don't see the Chihuahua as healthier than a Great Dane because of their body size. We just accept that there is diversity there. But diet culture wants us to believe that there is no diversity and that there is only one healthy body. And that if you don't have that one healthy body, you're unhealthy. You're unlovable. There is so much discrimination against people who don't look like the 5% of people that you'll see who take up probably 90% of social media and meat culture. If you look at movies and TV shows, you don't really see body diversity. And when you do see body diversity, those people stand out and those people get hate and those people get bullied on the internet. And this is all intentional, because if women especially are so busy trying to look a certain way, trying to shrink themselves, then they can't focus on changing the world. They can't focus on going after power. And all of this is really intentional. And this is led by patriarchy. Like, I'm not going to say that men don't struggle with body image, but it is no secret that women are a lot more victims to body image issues and discrimination. So if we go back to the topic of set point weight in the context of weight loss surgery, if you are above your set point weight, then you are likely chronically overeating, eating past fullness, giving your body more food than it needs. You might not be moving your body very much. So I'm not saying that if you are above your set point weight, it's necessarily healthy. Your set point weight is a weight at which you can hold and maintain while eating foods that you love and eating foods that make you feel good. So that is like having a well-rounded, balanced diet, moving your body in a way that feels good, having healthy habits, but not in a way that's obsessive, not in a way that is restrictive, not in a way that you feel like it is so hard to maintain. It's like a full-time job. Yeah. And so if anyone has been driven to weight loss surgery because they were above their set point weight, chances are that they didn't look at the root cause of it, their habits, the reasons that it caused them to turn to food. So when you have weight loss surgery, what happens is, yes, you're shrinking your body and you're making it harder to eat large quantities of food, and your set point weight is going to be destabilized. But being obsessed with achieving your set point weight is actually very counterproductive because you're still focused on weight instead of focused on your behaviors. What are the behaviors and the habits that I'm doing that are health promoting, that are leading me to feel good? Maybe that is gently moving your body at first, listening to your body, listening to your hunger cues, eating foods that make you feel good. So that's the tricky piece when it comes to intuitive eating and set point weight and listening to your body, is that if you have this like hold on your body image and what you think your weight should be, then it blinds you from what's really important, which is your behaviors. That's the only thing that you have control over.
Yeah, your input, right? I think with social media, I see a lot of people who, because everybody looks great and we all put our best days on social media. I see loads of people who've had weight loss surgery look great, but still don't feel, so that body dysmorphia, constantly on that wheel to get that last 10 pounds off or to get a bit more off. And, it's a vicious cycle. And I feel for so many people that I see, and even people I work with, but they just don't trust. Some of them just don't trust the process. And I put my hand up saying, I also struggled to trust the process. And if I did, maybe I wouldn't have reached the heights that I did and the struggles. But how do we balance that? That's what I'm trying to say, is all that to say is that, where do we, as people who've had disordered eating, probably eating disorders, full eating disorders, where do we, that fear of regain is so big, and it just hangs over everybody's head, and you can feel it. I don't know what I'm saying, but I'm just saying.
No, but and what you're saying, it made me think of one client in particular that I worked with this year or last year, I can't quite remember. And she had a very tumultuous relationship with food and her body. Like, she got to a very heavy weight in her adult life, and she struggled with her weight her entire life. Her family made comments about it, and it got to a point where it was like, it was unhealthy. And so she ended up getting the weight loss surgery. I think it was maybe like 4 years ago. And so now she was post weight loss surgery, and she was still struggling with binge eating. and emotional eating. So that's when she came to me, because she was like, I lost the weight, I got the surgery, but those issues are still there. And I'm so terrified of gaining that weight back. And so when we started working together, it's like, I don't know what the word is, but it's, I don't even want to say ironic, but it's sad, because the less you trust the process, the more likely you are to perpetuate the cycle.
Yeah.
Because when we started working together, I think it's really helpful when you're working with someone, because you have someone who has done this before. And so it's easier to trust the process when you're like being followed every step of the way. Because like when you're on your own, no matter what goal you're working on, to trust is so hard, because your instinct is not to trust. Your instinct is to want to control. Like that is literally a survival mechanism. And I am that way in all areas of my life. I want to know every possible outcome. I want to be able to control the future. And control is an illusion. And that's another conversation for another day. But as we started working together, the biggest thing that we were focusing on was focus on the way that you feel and on your behaviors. Like really, that is the piece. And we're just going to put weight loss on the back burner. We're going to put your weight on the back burner for now, because the more you're afraid of gaining weight, the more you're afraid of gaining that weight back, the more likely you are to overly try to control food, to restrict, to be anxious around food. And having a healthy relationship with food is everything. It is the foundation. You absolutely need it, because without it, you're always going to feel a little anxious, not trust yourself around food. So she started going through the process, and what she noticed is that she allowed herself to eat more than she thought was acceptable, because she was eating like really small portions, of course, because you have like all of that fear. So she allowed herself, and we worked together on looking at, okay, what are some times of the day that you tend to feel really hungry, or you tend to feel like not well or chaotic around food? When do the binges tend to happen? So when we looked at that, we started to see, okay, there are times in the day where we might have to adjust how much food you eat, maybe eat more, eat different types of foods there. So she started doing that. And when she like spread out her food and became more intentional with that, she saw that, oh, it feels less chaotic. I don't get to the end of the day where I need to eat so much because I'm so hungry or I'm so deprived. And so over time, the less she felt anxious about her body, the more balanced and peaceful her eating habits became. And then like your body works itself out. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, it does. It does. It definitely does. But I am speaking to that, those people that like me and some of the other people that I've worked with who have jumped from one diet to another because it didn't work in 2 weeks, because, you were told you should be able to lose a stone within 6 weeks, right? So it's just, and it is about trust, and, it sounds all amazing. I'm mindful of your time because I know, you're a busy lady, but this is such a great conversation, because a lot of people are really reluctant to get off that, because obviously if you have weight loss surgery, we do need structure, right? You need to get the right protein, you need to get the right fluids you do to recover. But 2 years out, 3 years out, and if we're still really stuck on protein shakes and protein bars and obsessing over protein, I find that really hard to navigate that and move people along to this trust your body and this intuitive cycle. I'm so sorry if you can hear my cat, everybody.
No worries.
Yeah.
And that's a really important point as well, is people think that eating intuitively means like F the rules, F structure, like that is not important. And that's probably the biggest misconception that keeps people afraid to try it, because part of intuitive eating, it's a self-care framework, which means it comes from a place of love. And so if there are certain things, especially post-surgery, that you actually do need to do in order for your body to function with all of those parameters afterwards, like prioritizing protein. There is a way to incorporate that. Like, for example, I've never had weight loss surgery, but I do work out and I am a very active person. And I know that if I don't prioritize protein, then I'm going to feel like crap and I'm going to be hungry right after. So I am mindful of those things. I am mindful of like, this does need to be part of my day. But the difference is that I need to do that and I want to do that because it feels good. It's not coming from a place of anxiety or of like needing to control. And that's one thing that I always explain to my members inside Food Freedom Academy is the intention behind your choices are everything. The place you're coming from, the emotions behind it, the thoughts behind it. And so if someone is like, I want to change my habits, but they're not doing the work to change their thoughts and their feelings around it, then it will feel like an uphill battle.
Yes, I definitely agree. And I always say, actually, when you've had, your half of your stomach removed, nobody did anything to your brain. So, you still come back to the same environment with the same thoughts, with the same feelings. Mm-hmm. So that's, and I think ultimately the answer is not going to just be one thing, and it's always going to be, it's going to be working with every part of your being, and
it's a holistic approach for sure.
Indeed. So tell us a bit about what you do and what, how can we get in touch with you and where could we find you?
Yeah. So what I do is I have a group coaching program called Food Freedom Academy. And this is really where we get into the deep stuff of rewiring your relationship with food, the way that you feel about yourself, your thoughts around eating, around your body, around exercise. Like, it's a really all-encompassing program. It's a group program. And people can find me on Instagram at Sabrina Magnan Health. And if they found me on your podcast, send me a DM. I really love to hear like where you found me. So you can just say like, hi, I found you on the Gastric Mindset podcast. Or they can also listen to my podcast as well. So it's called Live Unrestricted. And this is where we have these kind of conversations as well. So that's really where they can find me.
Amazing. That sounds brilliant. And I will put your details at the bottom of the show. And that sounds really great. So just before we part ways, is there, anything that you could give somebody that's just really unsure? So things are, maybe they're 2 years out and things are feeling a bit, they're feeling a bit, out of control a little bit. And they just, where could we start? What can we read? What could we do? I guess your podcast is a good place to start.
Yeah. My podcast is a good place to start. I would say that reading the Intuitive Eating book is a really good place to start as well. And I would say if it is possible for you, find someone to talk to that you trust. Whether that is a therapist or a coach or even like a friend, because when you're going through something alone, it is like 99% likely that you're going to fall back. Like you're going to just stay stuck in your own thoughts and your mindsets. Because I think it's Einstein who said it, but like, you cannot solve a problem from the same mind that created it. And so the only way for you to move forward is to start thinking differently. And like, if we knew how to think differently, we would think differently. Yeah. And so to be able to have a different perspective or to have someone bring up some of the blind spots for you is so incredibly valuable. So if it is possible, and I know it's not possible for everyone, but if it is possible to have a support system as you're working through this.
Yeah, no, that makes so much sense. And I love the quote. I don't know if it's the same quote, but you can't read the label from inside the bottle. So
Yeah.
I love that one. Another one I really love is don't let your worst enemy live between your two ears.
Oh, I love that. Yeah.
And it's all here. It's all in the head. It's all there, isn't it? Fabulous. Well, thank you so much. We've got so much great stuff, and I know everybody will get loads of value out of it. And they will come in on Instagram. You're just under your name, aren't you? Yeah.
Yeah.
Fantastic. So everybody go and say hello. Thank you, everybody. See you next week. I appreciate you for being here with me. I hope you got some value from this episode. If so, please give me a review. It will make me super happy and support others from our community to find the podcast. Share it with your Barry bestie. Connect with me on Instagram at Gastric Mindset. It'll be wonderful to hear from you.